And I have since left the dispatch game and gotten into firefighting and firefighter EMT. Well, EMT soon. I'm going to EMT school starting in a couple of weeks. I'm still fairly new at my fire agency, but I just really have a love for public safety.
Awesome. And you are a young buck, so we're getting a little bit different. What am I trying to say? Different
perspective.
Yeah, that's it. That's the word of how it is, because you started off really young.
Yep, right. So the week after I turned 18, I put in my application for my first dispatch job. And surprisingly, I got it. I was very, very much surprised. My thought was, why in the hell would you hire an 18-year-old whose only prior job experience was DoorDash and a high school job with Sonic?
We had Brenda, actually, she's retired now, but she was a previous guest, and she's the same thing. She was 18 or 19, and she's like, why the hell would you hire an 18-year-old straight out of high school or whatever? And but she made it a career, so
little did I know how traumatizing it could be.
Right? So what are your centers like down there in South Carolina, or for the most part?
So as I mentioned, I worked for 2 centers. I'm going to leave the names out, just based on some things that I'm saying. So Center A is the first center I worked for. It was a large, I wouldn't say metropolitan area. It was a mix of rural, suburban, and urban areas. Population, let's see. I don't want to give a random number when I have Google.
Right.
Population of about 400,000 people. We would average 14 to 15 persons on a fully staffed shift at any one time. That's comprising of 3 fire channels, 4 police channels, several call takers, and then a dispatch supervisor and a communication center supervisor. Wow. So there was, minimum of 10 people and a maximum of about 14.
I can't. Gotcha. So you had a comm supervisor there all the time?
Yeah, we had a comm center supervisor who just pretty much oversaw the entire operation. The dispatch supervisor, so the comm center supervisor was a 24/7 position, but it was more an admin position where they're dealing with the administrative side, and the dispatch supervisor really dealt with the day-to-day operations, overseeing it, make sure everything is good, reading every single call that comes out, just checking quality. That center also, I can't say enough good things about this center. Well, we had got a brand new facility, $26 million facility, absolutely beautiful, with over 40 positions for the expansion of that area. But we also had a full-time quality assurance, actually 2 full-time quality assurance personnel. We had a full-time NCSE TAC and then another assistant TAC. Then we had 2 administrative people that worked full-time, plus a deputy director and a director. Very, very large agency. It was the PSAP for the county. However, there were 3 municipalities that had their own 911 center as well. But we would transfer the calls to them. Now, we did handle medical for the entire county, though.
Wow. Gotcha.
And we were EPD, EFD, EMD certified, as well as the ETC course. All in all, after I started about 3.5 months of training before I even picked up a 911 call. So that's Center A. Absolutely great center. I enjoyed working there. The reason I left actually was proximity to home and the ability to get overtime. So that's whenever I left and moved to Center B. I did take a little bit of a pay cut to Center B. However, the overtime very much compensated for that pay rate cut. Center B is, for lack of better terms, a shit show. So, I was quickly put as a shift lead or supervisor, whatever you want to call it. I was the one running the show on my shift at night. There were a total of 2 people in that center. 3 is full staffing, but due to their lack of ability to keep personnel, we only had 2 people most nights.
Jeez.
And there were a lack of NCSC certified people in there, so a lot of the nights I was the only one running, or the only one certified NCIC. So if I had to go to the bathroom and we got a hit, I'd have to get a call on my cell phone from the other person. Hey, the thing's going off again.
Oh my god. Did you have that like doorbell shit things ringing to let you know?
It was Omnix. It wasn't even Omnix Web. It was the Omnix Force desktop, and it was running Windows Vista.
Oh my!
It was. I believe those computers had been there for NCIC, and we didn't have internet access in that center at all. So there was no Google. You didn't have Google, and there was a no cell phone policy. Was that adhered to? Absolutely not.
Wow.
Because there's plenty of things that we need to Google throughout the day. But
absolutely, like I can't even imagine.
That center, they run 3 primary police channels. The way their fire channels are set up, they have a mostly volunteer base. So there was like 5 or 6 different departments, and all those departments had separate channels. So there was 5 primary fire channels, 4 fire tacs, and 3 law channels that 2 people had to run. And that county had a population, let's see. Wow. That county had a population of about 30,000.
So were the comm centers both like county? Were you county employees or were you? Yes,
I was a county employee at both, and both were PSAPs. So Agency B, they were the only 911 center in the county. So every single call that we got, we took. We didn't transfer out to any other agencies, with the exception of Highway Patrol for non-injury motor vehicle accidents.
Gotcha.
Wow. Jeez. Cool. All right. Well, we'll jump into some of the questions, and then we'll just like go from there. What made you decide to begin a career in public safety?
So I'm going to start from the beginning. So I graduated high school when I was 16 and a half. I went to college at 17. I started in a business program. Very quickly, I realized that wasn't for me. You know, I didn't really find fulfillment in life, you know, just chasing after a profit that's not even going to me. I really just, there was no incentive to wake up in the morning and, you know, I'm going to go make profits for somebody else. Woohoo. I don't understand how some other people can get excited about that, but I really can't. It's going to be interesting, but I actually initially wanted to go into law enforcement, and that's why I started dispatch, because in my state you have to be 21, as with most states. Right. I started dispatch with the intention of going into law enforcement, and I really took an interest on that side. However, I'm friends with quite a few officers as in and out of work, and working there, I quickly realized that I really don't want to be going out and doing negative stuff in the community. Granted, I'm not saying that law enforcement does negative things, but they're the ones who take people to jail.
Right.
You know, and they don't always have the best, no matter how much community relations they do, how much good they do in the community, they still have to arrest people if there is a crime. Whereas with the fire department, you know, I get out and I get to help people. Nobody hates the fire department. As one of my coworkers once said,
except the police officers.
Well, our police officers love us. We actually have a really good working relationship with the police officers, which is great. The way I've heard it put is, there's no song called "Fuck the Firefighters," but there's a song called "Fuck the Police."
That is true. My husband says the same thing all the time.
Exactly. So you know, especially in this world that's growing worse and worse, unfortunately, as much as I really want to do law enforcement just for a personal safety thing and for my family, I have to be able to come home at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And with fire, I can take preventative measures and use PPE properly, so I can do my best to get home. Whereas law enforcement, you're kind of relying on the people in the community to not want to kill you. To put it bluntly.
Yeah.
So that's how I got started in public safety. Now, granted, I'm not new to the world of public safety. My dad was a career firefighter growing up from the time I was born till about the time I was 13. Then he became a pastor, and he was still a volunteer firefighter at that time. So I've grown up in fire stations. As I said, all my friends are EMTs, firefighters, police. It's really all I've ever known.
So do you know the term whacker?
Oh, yes. I've seen many. I have seen many.
I keep wanting to call it wiener, and I gotta say that's not what it's called.
I mean,
it's a whacker.
to be fair, they're pretty synonymous.
Oh yeah, that was a new term by Kacey.
Yeah,
A
definitely.
month or so ago, right?
Yeah,
We
the
hadn't heard that
term
one
whacker's
before.
been around for a pretty long time, and a lot of the volunteer departments around here, they've got their fair share
Okay.
of people that show up with a million lights on their truck and don't have a certification, but that's neither here nor there.
Right. So, can you share a memorable, good or bad experience from your career so far that's had a significant impact on you?
How many do you want? I've had I've had quite a few. So
Whatever comes to mind.
I'll start. I've got a few. So I'll start with, I think it was my second day after being released from training at Agency A, at the first agency I worked at. I'll paint the picture. It's Christmas Eve. Well, technically Christmas Day at this point. 3 a.m. I'm eating a chocolate chip pancake that my supervisor made, thinking this is the life. Yeah, 911 rings. I've got a mouthful of pancakes. Just pick up the phone. 911. What's the address of your emergency? Try to push the food into the side of my mouth and talk.
Yeah.
And he said, "Hey, is this blank county 911?" I said, "Yes, sir." "Okay, do you know this grocery store at this location?" Yes, sir, I'm familiar." No, I wasn't, but I had the cell phone ping, so I knew where he was at. That's how I always did. I'm just like, yeah, I know where you're at as long as I got a cell phone ping and I can put two and two together. But he said, "Okay, in the field adjacent to that, send an officer out here to find my body. There will be a note in my pocket. There will be a single gunshot wound to the right side of my head. There will be identification and a letter in my pocket. And thank you." Click.
Mm-hmm.
And 3 minutes later, officers, doing 100 and, plus miles an hour. I was watching them on the automatic vehicle locators. They were hauling, and when they showed up, he had a single gunshot to the right side of his head, just like he said. Keep in mind, I was 18, my second day. It was Christmas. I couldn't even eat the rest of my pancakes, man. And they were good
Welcome
pancakes.
To the world.
I just lost my appetite. And I got to say, that's been the single worst call that I took, and it happened so early in my career. Because I tried to even get a word in, but he disconnected before I could even form a sentence.
Yep.
Straight out of training, even though you've had training, what the fuck do you do in that case? There's
nothing.
Like,
yeah.
No.
I try to, I'm a guy, so I try to play off. Oh, I'm fine. Mm-mm.
So to this
really
day,
sucked.
that call really fucks with you mentally now.
Oh yeah. I mean, not as much as it used to. So, do y'all use Solacom phones?
No.
Okay, so the Solacom phone system that they use, it has this weird little bit of static whenever a 911 line disconnects. And that, I guess there's some PTSD or something in there. So at some points I would hear that on another call and it would disconnect and I would just start hearing that again.
Right.
It'd bring that back up. And that happened for about 6 months after that call. And it was pretty bad. I had to walk out a few times. Another negative call on the dispatch side, it was one of my good friends who's an officer had to report the criminal sexual conduct to her 4-year-old daughter.
Ugh.
And she asked specifically for me because she said that I was the only one that she wanted to talk to about it.
Wow.
I had to hold myself together and I had to follow the pro QA questions because I know that call would get pulled. Because, they send a message around saying, "Hey, Cooper, this hold is for you." And then they'll see the call put in. So, I knew it was going to get pulled. So I had to be, 100% professional.
Yeah.
And I was, but I walked out of that room in tears and I had to sit out there for about 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a really hard call.
I think if I had to call that in, it probably would have gone more like your first call. I would have been like, you're going to have to send somebody out here because somebody's going to have a gunshot wound to the side of their head.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's not going to be me.
Uh-huh. Yep. So it's that was a really, really, really rough call. You know, I haven't had any lasting negative effects about that. I called the officer on her cell phone off my cell phone when I stepped outside, you know, to have an off the record conversation, a personal conversation, which is technically a no-no, but, you know, I was talking to a friend.
Right.
I don't care at that point. I explained to my supervisor. She was very, very understanding. But it really meant a lot that friend trusted me enough to want to have me ask for me specifically.
Right. Right.
You
All right. So what's a good one? Now you got to share a good one.
So, this one starts out bad, turns into good. So this lady called administrative line, right? So I pick up the phone, Blank County Dispatch, Cooper. How many pills do you have to take to kill yourself? Excuse me? How many pills do you have to take to kill yourself? Well, why are you asking? She's like, because I'm trying to kill myself. And it was on an admin line, so I'm like, oh gosh.
Great, right?
I love those.
Yeah, it's like, okay, well, what's your name? Well, I don't really feel comfortable sharing that. Okay,
right.
We go through. Another coworker, she picks up on my conversation. I love that coworker to death. She was an awesome dispatcher. She was an awesome friend. She picked up on it and hearing what I was saying, and she immediately put it in the monitor mode so she could listen. And she was doing other stuff. She was trying to do some detective work while I was on the phone. This lady starts taking pills on the phone. You can hear her. And these weren't, you know, well, I'm going to just take a whole bottle of Tylenol and it won't actually kill me. It'll just fuck up my liver. No, she was taking oxycodone pills.
Oh.
And she had a full bottle. And I could hear her taking them on the phone. I was on the phone with her for 2.5 hours. She was slowly getting more and more dreary, but luckily, I don't know if she was finally high enough or what. I would talk to her about something unrelated about her family, and then I would, you know, quickly prompt a question to get her to answer it without thinking it. And eventually that worked. And then when I finally had her address, she's like, well, I guess the police are coming. Do you think if I walk out with a knife, they're going to shoot me?
Oh, Lord.
And granted, she was outside of our jurisdiction. She was actually 3 hours away.
Oh, my God.
Of course.
She refused to be transferred. Like, she said, no, I only want to talk to you. She refused to be transferred. And my supervisor was like, transfer. I said, I can't. This lady won't talk to anybody else. So my other coworker was making phone calls to the jurisdiction where she was at. We were able to get to her. I was able to get that out of her using techniques that I learned in my training. That's why training is so important, in my opinion. But I was able to use those techniques and get it out of her. And we were able to save her life that night because I called to get an update and she would have died if not.
Wow.
Yeah.
And, you know, we were doing everything. We even, officers are supposed to authorize exigent pings, but because it wasn't in our jurisdiction, my supervisor, you know, risked her, I wouldn't say risked her job per se, but technically your dispatcher or dispatch supervisor is not supposed to authorize a cell phone ping, but because of the jurisdictional lines, she did.
Right.
She signed for a exigent ping, and that helped me. It came back with like 1,000-meter radius, but it at least confirmed that what she told me was where she was in the general area. Because we didn't have a phase 2 or anything because it was admin, but we were able to get the exigent ping back. I had the teamwork in that call was, you know, incredible. I could not have done that by myself. You know, I was only one small part of the equation was talking to her, but my partners on that were just nothing short of amazing and saved that woman's life.
But, you know, with that being said, like those calls were the worst for me, especially the ones that you had to stay on the phone. And it always seemed like it took, even though in our jurisdiction they were just, maybe 15, 20 minutes out, depending, but 3 hours. And like you run in my, for me personally, I ran out of shit to talk about. And we've talked about on the show how we always have, we have different hats that we wear: the counselor, the teacher, the lawyer, the whatever. And to have to like just bring up just small conversation to
Now,
one, try to keep this person talking. But geez,
I don't know how y'all are, but I was the type of person, I would make up bullshit on the phone. I'd give them a whole fake life story if it means that I could. If it means that I could, I wouldn't do it unless necessary. But like in the case of suicidal patients, man, I'd lie my ass off. I would make up a whole fake life story. I a veteran called me suicidal one night. I made up a story. My brother's in the army. Yada yada yada. I was able to get on the same level as my brother ain't in the army.
Yeah.
But at that point, I think that my I at least justified those little white lies to myself because they're inconsequential, and I've seen many times where they have succeeded in helping me save somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, like whatever you can do to make a connection with them. I think one of the longest calls that I was stuck on that like wasn't a medical call was, Kacey, do you remember the guy that was bomb threatening the mall all the time?
I don't know that I remember that.
My God. And look,
where was I on that? Shit.
I don't know. And I was like, he called, and he would call, and normally he would hang up, or you wouldn't get a good retransmit off his cell phone or whatever. And he finally called and was like staying on the phone, and I think he ended up being at the McDonald's by the mall, but like they're secret squirreling around the mall trying to find him. We're trying to like get a tighter and tighter paying on this thing, and I'm like, what? I mean, he was just loony as he could be. What am I going to talk to you about, dude? Like, I mean, oh God. And I'm like, if they don't get there, if they don't find this cat quick. And finally, I think what happened there was that one of my partners started like, cause there's a row of businesses outside of the mall, and started calling them and asking if they had somebody on a phone. And like the McDonald's wasn't busy, and they were like, yeah, this cat bird just sitting here talking on the phone, and God, but yeah, I think he called in threats at maybe some of the schools too, but it was really annoying for a few weeks. Like he was
dumb enough to do it on a 911 line.
Yeah, that time he was, and he had. I mean, it was. I can't believe you don't remember that case. I don't know what you were doing then.
Who knows?
Because I mean, we had because our agency was kind of close to Quantico, so we had FBI resources. I mean, we had dogs from everywhere. Because if you got to sweep a mall or a school, it's a lot, right?
Yes.
So. I mean, they were coming in from everywhere. I mean, a couple times a week for this fool. And yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, we had a big issue with swatting calls. However, they were, I almost shit myself one day. I was still a baby dispatcher. I was still just a call taker at that time. And I know you've seen in movies the deep computer altered voice, I will kill you kind of thing. Right. That's exactly what it was.
Ugh.
So it gets better. He's like, okay, this address, this hotel on the second floor. I've kidnapped a girl. I'm not going to tell you which room. You have 30 minutes to find her. I'm a killer. he gave me the address. It was in one of the jurisdictions of the municipalities. So this was so awkward. I'm like, well, sir, I'm gonna need you to hang on real quick. I've got to transfer you.
Yes. Yes.
Oh my gosh. I'm just like, so I'm like, okay, Blank City Police, how can I help you? Yes, ma'am, I've got a caller to transfer you. All right, sir, you're on the line with Blank City Police.
Oh, and you just let it, like, you didn't even give her a heads up. You just, oh no, you just.
No, because the solar phone system,
Oh, no.
when you
Have
muted
fun
them
with
or
that one, B.
when you put them on hold, it made a bunch of beeps, and I didn't want to freak them out.
Oh,
That was
gotcha.
part of our policy is as far as the those kind of callers, callers making threats, you don't mute them or put them on hold. If you need to, you can like unplug the headset a little bit so the microphone will go out, but the beeps could freak them out.
Oh, yeah, see, our 911 calls would just transfer open.
Well, since this was an admin line.
Oh, they called on an admin line. Gotcha.
Yeah, so they were smart about it. They weren't even in the area. They called on an admin line through a texting app.
Yeah.
Because we checked the carrier and it came back to like text free or something.
Right.
I was like, and at that point, unless you're getting the FBI involved, you're not finding them.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, those are kind of interesting. And then we had we had one after. This was later in my time there, and the guy called. He was saying some really, really nasty stuff. He's like, I'm on the roof. I've got snipers. I'm in the house. I'm pretty much saying that he was playing with himself.
Oh, Lord.
So I put that in the CAD notes. I said, caller advised that he was playing with
masturbating,
himself.
right?
That's the word that I used.
Right,
I said,
right,
caller
right. You gotta use
advised
the right words, right?
Caller advised he was masturbating to the tied up girls. And then my supervisor's like, why'd you type that in there? Why'd you type that in there? That's a public record. I'm like,
okay.
Verbatim.
I mean, so is the phone call, and that is what he said.
Yeah, I said it's a legal record, and the officers need to know exactly what he said.
Right.
You shouldn't have put that in there.
I mean, it's one thing if you put in there like he's diddling himself, right?
Yeah.
Like,
well,
you use the correct terms.
And to quote him, he said, "I'm jerking my dick." So I wasn't going to put that in the call.
Right,
so
exactly.
I put the technical term.
Right.
But I'm like, I at least PG'd it down, sort of.
Right.
I said, but the officers are responding, and they're about to raid this dang house.
Right.
So I feel like I was all about my type of dispatching was, I'm not here to interpret. I will pass it along.
Right. I'm just giving the info. Right.
I don't interpret what they need or don't need. I'm just gonna put it in there.
Right.
My supervisor lost her shit at me.
Oh my god.
But like that was kind of funny. After it was, I guess some kid was playing Xbox and he pissed somebody off, and they started swatting his house.
Nice.
Of all reasons.
So with all of that stress,
right,
how do you manage and maintain the resilience in such a demanding role?
Well, you never said how do you healthily manage it. Work.
Well, you know what? Sometimes we don't do that, so that's why we don't say that.
Nicotine and overtime.
There you go.
When I was at that agency, I really couldn't work overtime, so I just kind of found things to stay busy.
I'm baffled by that. Like
yeah, no,
that's total opposite.
No, don't get me wrong. At Agency B, the second agency I was at, there was like 3 months where I had worked every single day in a row with only like 2 days off total in 3 months.
Oh my gosh, yeah. See, that's the normal. If you want to work it, it's there, right?
Yeah, but my check was like $2,100 after taxes there. So working all those days, so I was not complaining. Because me and my friend up at that agency, we would come around 3 o'clock when there's nothing going on. We would take turns staffing. Granted, you're not supposed to do that, but there was 0 calls usually from the hours of 0300 to 0600. So she would she would man their phones, and if anything came up, she'd just like wake up. But
Wow.
I trusted her. She was a good dispatcher. Otherwise, I would not have done that with somebody I didn't trust. But I really had no choice working 84 hours a week.
Right.
And that wasn't optional overtime. That was, you're going to be here.
Wow.
Jeez.
So I worked at the two polar opposites, one where I couldn't get any overtime and one where I had all the overtime.
That's a lot.
Yeah, it is. So, what are the key qualities or skills that you believe are essential for someone working in public safety in general? Since you've dispatched and now you're a firefighter.
They got to be quick on their feet. They gotta think quick. They gotta react quick. They gotta know what they're doing. They gotta learn how to not second guess themselves. But that's where, as I said, the training comes into play, where I've seen the dramatic difference between the two agencies. So, the qualities and skills, I believe, are imparted mostly in training, but there's just some people that's honestly not cut out for it. If you can't develop that radio ear after 6 months, you're not gonna. And that's just my opinion. I know it's a little bit controversial, but either you get it or you don't.
Well, that's exactly my exact words, because in my opinion, there is no in between. And I can't say for working out in the field, because obviously I have not done that. But as far as dispatching, there is no in between, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I mean, I understand that people need a job, but if they don't get it, fire them. There's no excuse for risking our officers and firefighters and our citizens for a shitty dispatcher. And at Agency B, which now dispatches for me, in the field, I've seen that. You know, I've been put in very dangerous situations because of, for lack of a better term, slow people that should have been fired a long time ago.
Yeah. And as a trainer of like newer folks, and after doing it for so many years, because Anna and I both dispatched 16 years each, and before we both hung it up. But the more you train and the more like years you've done it, like if that person you're sitting down with day in and day out is gonna eventually get it. And for an agency not to support you, like, I know everybody needs help. Everyone's pretty much understaffed in pretty much every agency around the damn country, I think. But it's still not, reason.
And at Agency B, as I told y'all before the show, we had there was no training. You were taking 911 phone calls on your first day, and you were running a radio at the same time, and you just had somebody watching you and critiquing you as you go, which is not good. You need to have some sort of formal education.
Oh my God, no, I can't.
I had some girl that went through 1 month of quote unquote training, which was supervised while she learns it. And she was convinced that because she had finished her quote unquote training, she was the best dispatcher ever. We had an incident on an overdose where she was arguing with the caller, and I'm looking at the pings. This is when I was supervising that shift. I was looking at the pings, and you want to talk about agencies not having my back? I was looking at the pings, and I'm like, hey, it's 405, Example Street. No, this 405 other Example Street. No. And she's like, I'm not stupid. I know what I'm doing. And then she's arguing with the caller. Are you sure you're not on this street? Like, she's yelling at the caller. And then I say something to her, and she thought she muted the phone, and she screams at me.
Man.
And keep in mind, this is while the guy's overdosing. 6 minutes from the time that 911 call was incoming to the time that I finally got it dispatched. And my admin did not have my back. I actually got written up with her for her yelling at me.
Wow.
I don't care. I will talk as much shit to you as possible if you're putting somebody's life at risk like that. I don't care. And that's one thing that people, back to qualities and skills, you gotta learn how to take constructive criticism. Because if I have to raise my voice at you in a situation like that, shit's going downhill, and I'm not gonna do it. I like to be a nice person. but I don't play when it comes to people's lives.
Yeah, especially in this line of work, you most certainly can't.
In this line of work, you have to listen. If there's, and she's like, I'm like, I know I haven't been doing this, but for 2.5 years. But here's the thing, you've been doing this for 2.5 months. So I've got 10 times the experience you do, even though it's still only 2.5 years. I said, I think I know what the fuck I'm talking about.
Right.
And she went and cried and went. I mean, she didn't cry in front of me. She went and cried to the director, and I'm just like, I never liked. I got thrown into the shift lead and supervisory position. I didn't want it. I'm not that type of person. That's the only time I've ever had to raise my voice to somebody. And that's because some guy was overdosing, agonal breathing, everything.
Wow.
6-minute delay in that high priority call. That could be the difference between life and death.
Absolutely.
But my other coworker that I had on my shift for the rest of it, she was nothing short of amazing. She was one of those, and she was a little bit of a slow learner, but they had written her off because she didn't know how to do it on her own, and they didn't really want to show her. So they kind of written her off, thrown her on night shift. Oh, she can't even run fire radio. She can just do police. She can only do this police channel. So I took the time. She's twice my age. You know how weird it is teaching somebody that's twice your age and not feel like condescending or an asshole. It's very, very hard. I'm still friends to her with this day. I talk to her almost every day, if not every other day. I go to church with her. I love her to death, but she was awesome. All she needed was a little bit of coaching. They had written her off. She wasn't dumb. She did an amazing job. She was super sweet to people on the phone. They had told her that, oh, you're too nice to people on the phone. You need to be more authoritative. You always get more flies with sugar than salt.
Yeah.
She was very nice to people. She didn't have any of those, other than her grandfather being a police chief back in the day. She didn't have really any friends or family in public safety, but she still, regardless of that, put the responder safety up top. And that was always my number one priority. But she, all it took was a little bit of coaching, a little bit of training, showing her how to do stuff, explaining it to her. That's an agency B where they didn't have any sort of pro QA or protocols. So I just kind of wrote out a guide that was loosely followed, EPD, EMD, EFD questions without the instructions, obviously, but just to make sure, hey, here's the things you need to get on these calls, because nobody ever told her that. And then they wrote her off because she didn't know what they didn't teach. And, unfortunately, she left me. It wasn't anything to do with me. The admin pissed her off. She had a family member pass away, and they wouldn't let her take off. Or they say, well, if you do take off, you're going to need to find coverage. And she's like, you know what? That's my 2 weeks. That.
Yeah, we've been there, heard that before.
Yeah,
and which is really sad for me to see her go. And that's where agencies kind of have to learn the difference, and whether they're just not getting it or whether they're not trained right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because she was an amazing dispatcher, and that's the thing that sucks, is who's making the decision of, are they a lost cause? But if they are, fire their ass, get rid of them because they're a risk to public safety.
Yes, that's right. That is 100% true.
The breaking point for me to leave that agency, I was already volunteering with my fire agency at that time. That's whenever I was working overtime on another shift. So I was just a regular dispatcher. I wasn't in the supervisory position. I took a call. It was I think it was a 35, mid-30s female, unconscious but breathing. And they could not give me a reason why. To me, that's always a red flag. If you're under the age of 60, unconscious, unresponsive, and you do not have a reason, you're getting law enforcement. That's just the way I always see it, because there's something sketch, and he admitted to them drinking. So there's something sketchy in that to me. So I'm like, hey, we need to send law enforcement. She's like, no, there's nothing suspicious about that. Somebody's just unconscious. Are you sure? Well, it was my current boss now. He's my boss now, but he responded out there and he actually had to back out of scene because of scene safety concerns. And
Wow.
the call taker was right. I had been doing that longer than the person that was supervising over me on that shift. And I'm like, there's something wrong. And no, it's bad. When my chief has to back out, it's bad. He's not scared of nothing. It's bad. The dude was screaming at him, get out of my effing house. I'm going to shoot you. I'm going to kill you.
Nice.
Jeez. Yeah, that's not cool.
Yeah. So, well, that might lead us into what advice would you give someone who is new or considering a career in dispatch?
Prepare to be traumatized.
I was thinking you were gonna say trust your gut there because I think definitely when you have that as a call taker or as a dispatcher, when you have that feeling of something's not right, go with it.
I'm sure y'all can relate to this. Some of the gut is going to be experience, but some of the gut is just going to be human.
The gut, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Like you can have gut based on your experience, but also you can have gut based on human.
Right.
Your human experiences. Like as I said, to me, as a general rule of thumb, anything under 60 with an unexplainable unconscious patient, if they have medical issues, they're diabetic. Their significant other is going to know that, and they will tell you that. But if they're said, we're drinking and she's unconscious, I don't know what happened, just get him here now.
Right. I always love that. That's a kicker for me. Just get him here now.
Right.
What do you think I'm doing?
Right. What do you think I'm doing? And what did you do?
Right.
Because
what have y'all really been doing?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I mean, it's prepare to be traumatized. That's going to be my number one. As I said, I have a really bad thing for the starting out at a new agency because as I said, I've been volunteering for the fire agency that I'm with now for a few months before I left dispatch. I was unemployed for a month and a half while waiting on the hiring process for the fire agency. So I was actually running a call the night before my interview, and it was a motor vehicle accident with entrapment. It was a fatality, and it was a good friend of mine, a really good friend that was a member of the department. 9 p.m., 8 p.m. at the night before my interview for a full-time firefighter job.
Wow.
And that was terrible. If somebody's wanting to start in public safety, understand you are going to see really fucked up shit. If you're gonna dispatch, you're gonna hear really fucked up shit.
Yep.
I've heard people blow their brains out on the phone.
Yep. Me too.
I've heard people kill other people on the phone. I've heard the screams of those who just found their child dead, the screams of those who just found their parent dead, the screams of those who just found any other family member dead, cries for help as they're in an entrapped motor vehicle, women that are being beaten while they're on the phone.
Yep.
The screams and the agony, like you will never forget some of these voices.
That is the truth, because they still mess with me too to this day, and I don't even dispatch anymore myself. I've been out of it for a year and a half now. So, but I do work for my local fire department in admin, but so I still hear a little bit, stuff that's on the radio, but nothing like.
Yeah, I mean it's crazy. I mean, I'm not gonna say I'm not gonna say not to do it for somebody that was the age when I started. I mean, I had already been around public safety before, so I knew that the world wasn't a great place. But going into it that young, I grew up quick.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Hearing some of those things. Some 18-year-olds are still in high school. As an 18-year-old, I was hearing the worst moments of people's lives.
Yeah.
One of the ones that stuck with me, there was a 7-year-old child in a wheelchair that the mom had to get him out of the wheelchair and do CPR on him on hot pavement in the middle of the summer.
No.
And she was crying in pain because it was burning her. and she was crying because she was having to do CPR on her 7-year-old son who was disabled at the age of 18.
Yeah.
And I was, and the kid didn't make it. And they called him on scene. So, you're pretty much thinking, I was 18 thinking I could have done something better to save that 7-year-old. That's a lot for an 18-year-old.
It is. And I've always said in my opinion that 18 is way too young.
I'll say yes and no. It depends. So for me, I mean, I may be biased. I'd like to think I was a damn good dispatcher, and some of the best dispatchers I worked with are very young.
Yeah. Well, you do sound pretty mature for a young fella. Not that's really not normal.
The public safety world public safety world's done that to me. But I mean, some of the best dispatchers that I worked with were young. One of my very good friends, she's 25 now, but she started when she was 18, and she's one of the best dispatchers that they have. That's an agency A. And but then again, sometimes you get the 18-year-olds and they're very, immature, and it's gonna sound bad, but the best young dispatchers are those from less than perfect families.
Yeah.
Because they've kind of had to grow up faster.
Right.
Yeah, and I think like the young people are much quicker to decide whether or not they're going to stay with it. People that have a lot of life experience and have dealt with a lot of bullshit are, I think, more likely to just sort of try to ride the process out and see what happens. Like, are they going to get fired? Are they going to get let go? Or whereas the younger crowd is like, oh, hell no, I'm not doing this. Or, yeah, I can do this. So I think that's kind of the difference there. And I agree. Some of the, best dispatchers I know are young. I mean, it's funny. Like now I'm saying, oh yeah, I was older when I started. I mean, I don't know how old I was, but 30-ish. I had already, done some life, but I like the guy who trained me was younger than me. And he's a fantastic dispatcher. So, and I think he started when he was 18, but he was also involved in public safety, volunteered, EMS. So yeah, but he's fantastic.
And I feel like that makes some of the best dispatchers too, is having somebody, a significant other, a parent, grandparent, cousin, uncle, whatever, that's in public safety. Because some people, they just have a neutral view of public safety if they don't have any relatives, and they're, like, okay, well, this is just a job. To those of us that have people that are close in public safety, what if that was my family member? Some of us have worked with our close friends and our family members over the radio, and your goal is to get them home. It's not just a job.
Right.
And I think it also helps being able to talk about things like when we were talking before we started recording about, you having the perspective now going to the fire department and like knowing when they're confusing dispatch or they're pissing dispatch off because of what they're saying and what dispatch may not be giving you that's important, right? Like when you have, for me, my husband's a firefighter, so we talked about that stuff, and I learned the lingo and I learned. So when you say crap like that, like I remember Nitro Kacey one day, she texted me, I don't know, it was late. And it was after I had stopped working full time and she was on nights. And she texted me like midnight. And she's like, what's an FDC? And I'm like, what? Okay. And she'd been dispatching for years, but it was just like something that, they normally would say fire department connection or whatever. And this person happened to just go with the FDC, and she was like, "Who to what?"
Yeah, and
and
that's I don't know. Did y'all's agency have the EPD, EFD, EMD protocols in place?
So we have done EMD, and just within the last couple of years did they go to EFD. We never did EPD.
That's great. I hated EPD.
Well, I hate EFD, so
really, I enjoyed EFD because, especially for people that have no knowledge about fire, it helps them accurately code the call and having that training and protocol. And I think that's part of those protocols do good. They teach you some of the basic lingo. Even though that's for call taking, you start to understand a little bit of the lingo for the radio side.
Yeah, I just felt like, and it may be too because I was already an experienced fire dispatcher, and my husband's a firefighter, my brother's a firefighter. Like, so to me, it was really cumbersome, and it takes too long. I'm like,
I agree with that, and I agree with that on the EMD side too. They say it's to get it out quicker.
Yeah, I think EMD, it was really funny because the first agency that I worked for, we used ProQA. And so I learned that right off the bat. And it became very second nature. Sometimes you're just like, oh God, I feel like an idiot because I'm, saying something dumb. But, you just kind of got used to it. And then when I went to the other agency, they did not have software. They used the flip cards, which nobody used. We just winged, right?
I use ProQA too, and we had to use flip cards once in a computer outage.
Right. Right. And then when we went to EFD, that's when they went to ProQA. So at that point, I hadn't used ProQA in like 10 years. So I was like, oh God, here we go again. And it does feel, EMD does feel slower in that part than it did to me the first time.
Now, granted, if it's truly priority, it'll get it out quick. If it is truly priority, because you and I both, I'm sorry, I can't see Kacey down there, but all three of us, we all know that 90% of medical calls are absolute bullshit. And it takes forever on those calls, but if it's truly an emergency where they're unconscious or not breathing, it'll spit it out fairly quick. I was one of those bad ones that would just put in the CAD code first and and drop it and then do ProQA like I wasn't supposed to, but
yeah,
oh well, I was all about getting it out quick like that. I did that a lot on the police side. I hated EPD. Now, one thing I hated about EMD though, Kacey, did you use EMD at all?
Oh, just the flip cards, and then we did, like Anna said, the EFD with the ProQA, but we that's all that we had.
Now, for the flip cards, does it still have you say, "I'm sending the paramedics to help you now"?
Yes.
That always bothered me so much because so my county, the county A, they did a mix of BLS and ALS trucks. It would bother me so much that I was saying that there's a paramedic coming to help you,
knowing that
a BLS truck, and I'm just like, they're not going to know the difference for the most part,
right? But I do, and that's the only good thing is that most callers, didn't have the knowledge, but yeah,
because they just think, oh, they're all medics, but they're not, and that always bothered me. And I'm surprised nobody at the agency thought that was a liability because they think everything else is.
Yes, you're right.
But I mean, it's that was a little ick of mine that I hated about EMD. Slay the most comfortable position for you, and if anything changes, give us a call back immediately.
Yeah.
For the toe pain at 3 a.m. Like, go to damn urgent care, hang up with me, and don't bother me again.
Yeah. Don't you wish we could have said that? Yes.
Oh, I wish. I'm jealous. Some of these counties are having those new non-emergent transports where they're not tying up a medic truck or referrals to urgent care. I wish.
Yeah.
Because the county that I'm currently in, it's County B for dispatch, and the one that I work fire in, I work for a city fire department. However, the county EMS, we only have 3 medics in the entire county.
Wow.
So, and my fire department also runs a rescue squad medic, which is volunteer, which means only when the staffing's there. But 3 medic trucks is not a lot.
No, it's not.
And
It's
we'd have to
definitely not.
hold calls, man, and I didn't like doing that. And once you establish patient care, you can't abandon it. So
Right.
if you have toe pain and 2 blocks away you've got a cardiac arrest, but you're already on scene to the toe pain, send the next available, which is 30 minutes away.
Yeah.
Right. Did I miss how many calls do you normally run fire rescue?
This last year we did 1,400 calls in 1 year.
Okay.
Now I started with them about September, October, but now we document a lot of things like the community service, public assists.
Right.
So we, as with most fire departments, very little of what we run is actually fires,
Right.
especially structure fires. We operate a heavy rescue as well. Well, we operate heavy rescue, light rescue, a rescue squad medic that gets out sometimes. It's for peak capacity. We have rescue boats. We have a lot of things. So in my county, there's only 5 paid firefighters on duty in the entire county. So 2 in my agency, 3 at another municipality. All the counties volunteer. So we end up running a lot of mutual aid, and we run a lot more. I'd venture to say we run more MVAs with entrapment than we do actual structure fires.
Right.
Which I mean, I like a good cut job. We just got new fancy electronic cutting tools where you don't have to have the hydraulic hose. And this is bad to say, but I'm ready for a cut job so we can put them to use. I don't wish that upon anybody, but
Right.
you want to play with the big toys.
Yeah. Yeah, the first agency I worked for was primarily volunteer. It was mostly, the medics were also firefighters, but they pretty much were only on the ambulances. And then they kind of started doing like supplying drivers, and now I think they're just back to pretty much riding the ambulances. And and then the second jurisdiction, which is bigger, is now pretty much, there's some volunteers left, but it's 11 career stations. And when I started, they were career during the day, volunteer at night, and then they went, a few stations went to 24/7, and so it's kind of an evolving process. But
County A I worked for, they had approximately, say 40 stations, 25 of which were career, always with full staffing. And it was a fire rescue agency, so it was a fire and EMS agency, so everybody was trained in everything. So everybody was an EMT, everybody was a firefighter, regardless of what you rode. Which personally I think is good just for staffing, because that makes them very useful in things such as motor vehicle accidents.
Mm-hmm.
Plus rehab on a fire scene, you don't have to tie up a medic for rehab. You've got a bunch of EMTs.
Right.
But here in the county that I work in, or the area that I work now, they're just EMT or medics. They're not certified firefighters.
Nice.
Gotcha.
So you had said before we had started recording that you wanted to touch a little bit about NCIC, everybody's favorite.
Yeah, that's I loved being nosy. I hated all the little codes, but that's a big topic of debate that I've heard people debate upon, and I wanted to get to know y'all's opinions. As far as, and I think a big differentiation that has to be made here too, that especially Agency B that I worked for didn't really understand, is the difference between DMV and NCIC data. They're 2 completely separate systems, even though they are on the same computer. DMV can be used for a lot more than NCIC. But what are y'all's opinions on running things without an officer explicitly asking?
Well, for me personally, depending on what type of call I may have been taking, and just having the experience as I'd been in dispatch, over the years, I would come to know what unit specifically that may have been working, what he likes, or the call type itself, what was going to be needed, later on in the call. So I would go ahead and do it. But then, of course, with criminal histories, that kind of thing, obviously you have to kind of be
you have to have
careful
an
with
officer
that.
for that.
Right. So, but as far as the DMV stuff, running to see if people were wanted, or, checking history, that type stuff, as far as like our local history, and just getting that kind of stuff ready and put in the call notes. I mean, a lot of times it ended up being worthwhile.
Yeah, like for example, what I used to do. So if there was a traffic stop, I would go ahead and run the driver's. I would run the tag, of course, as I hit on that a little bit more in a minute. But I would run the tag, and then I would run the driver's license of the registered owner, because 9 times out of 10, that's who's driving. So they would copy a 27 number. Be like, is it XX name, A firm? I copy valid class D Delta clear 29.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
Done. Yeah.
It's already in the call notes, and then he can just pre-fill his ticket with that.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't take me very long to run 27 29s. We had Premier One CAD, and it had NCIC and DMV query integrated, so I could query a DO number, paste it over to the call notes, and rerun it for NCIC within 30 seconds, just because of the good software that we had.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
but even saving that, I mean, I'm bored, I'm nosy, I want to see whether the registered owner is suspended. You know what I mean?
But I didn't always do that, but as far as the registered owner, but like you said, most times that is who was driving.
With my state, it was pretty easy because it gave you the DL number for them. So all you had to do was requery it.
Yeah.
Right.
Now that wasn't really frowned upon by my agency, agency A at least. Agency B, however, they were what I would consider not very NCSC savvy, but also they didn't really understand, I don't think, the restrictions and the intent of it. So they will not run tags unless the officer asks them on a traffic stop. An officer will go on a traffic stop, call out, South Carolina Alpha Bravo Charlie 123, repeating ABC 123, and they will not run that tag. They'll enter it into the CAD, but until the officer asks, "Did you run that tag?" They don't run the tag.
Oh, well, that just sounds dumb.
Yeah. Well, and that's just DMV. I mean, that's not, not.
It queries NCIC for stolen.
It does, but for stolen, right? But it's not. Yeah. It's not querying anything. Like, you're not querying.
They put out an SOP. It's like, until the officer specifically asks you to run it, you don't run it. It's like, what?
And then it's pretty important to know if it's stolen or not when they're stopping it.
And for example, one time I was working some overtime on day shift. This was like right when I started at Agency B. I'm working overtime on day shift. Some dude called in claiming a police impersonator, running blue lights. And he gave me a tag. So before I even dispatch this call, I run the tag. Because if it came back to an agency, I'm just going to clear it out.
Right.
Because obviously it's a real cop. Why'd you run it? What, did an officer tell you that you could run that tag? No, you could go to jail for that. What? Tell me you have a poor understanding of how that works without telling me.
Right.
And I think that's what differentiates a good dispatcher between bad. I mean, good dispatchers know how to interpret information and use it to their benefit.
Yeah.
Well, and it could be too, like, what were their dispatchers going through? Were they going through the same NCIC certification as the other agency, or no? Because if they weren't, then that could be a thing.
Well, they did. They did have the So SLED is the governing agency for NCIC in South Carolina, and it's a 24-hour course in our state for full function. But instead of doing the 24-hour course, that agency just handed you the book and told you to study it.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But they had up the whole chain. They had a very poor understanding of how of the, you know, how it was to query NCIC, what reason you had. You know, I had one person tell me there, oh, well, that's a violation of somebody's right if you run them without an officer asking. No, it's not.
Well, if you're not certified to do it, it is.
Well, yeah. But if
but
you're
then you shouldn't even have access to the system.
Definitely.
Yeah,
not.
well, that agency was a walking list of violations. They would have people leave up their terminals so uncertified people could run it, and
I would not want. No, hell no.
But they would do that, but they wouldn't let you run a tag on it. And to me, not running a tag when an officer initiates a traffic stop is an officer safety issue.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah,
what if it's stolen?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would go as far as not only running the tag, but I would check history that we may have had in our CAD for that tag. And then during whatever call that may have been attached to, I would check individuals that may have been involved in that call, because that could be the same people. Like, yeah, I was kind of...
Especially because, you know, so Agency B, the officers did not have MDTs linked to CAD. So they could not see CAD data. Everything was over the air. So I like to advise them, you know, if they pulled this person over 3 times and they cleared with a warning the last 3 times in the last 6 months, I'm going to advise them this is their 4th time being stopped. Because you're going to learn. You know, you've already got 3 breaks because the officer didn't know that you've been pulled over for 2 other times within 6 months.
Jeez.
So things like that.
That just sounds like some backwoods shit going on up in there.
It is pretty backwoods up in there.
Like, holy shit.
I don't know if y'all have heard of Caliber CAD.
No, I've never
Caliber is what they used to Agency B, and it was I could do better with a pen and paper, honestly. But
that's scary.
Yeah,
no, but like you're saying, like the backwoods thing. So I got in listening to this true crime podcast about the Murdoch murder thing, right? And they've since branched out into like other South Carolina crime, and I'm like, holy crap, like what the hell is going on down there? I mean,
fun fact,
we thought Virginia was bad. Like, holy shit. I'm like, backwoods country. And sometimes I'm like, what the hell does SLED do? Are they investigating? What is going on?
So so fun fact, one of my really good friends that I spoke about earlier, her dad was actually Alex Murdaugh's cellmate a few months ago.
Oh my God. Hilarious.
Yeah. Because they were both, without giving out too many details, her dad was involved in law enforcement in some way, shape, or form. So he was put into protective custody, as was Alex Murdaugh. They were the 2 oldest people in the group, so they put them together. God. And her dad and Alex Murdaugh played cards.
It's funny as shit. Wow.
It's like, that's interesting. Like the Alex Murdaugh, she's like, yup.
Right. That dude. Oh my gosh. That's funny.
It's a small world sometimes, ain't it?
It is.
But yeah, no, South Carolina's crazy. Another one of the calls I didn't take personally, but that girl that I told you that I had, that was kind of written off by other people, that I, tried to took her to my belt and turned her into a great dispatcher. She had a call from a wife that killed her husband. It was great. Like, it was, my name's Jane Doe and I just shot my husband. Well,
you love how they're just matter of fact about it, right?
Yeah, and I hear my call taker over there. She's like, you just shot your husband?
Right.
Well, where'd you shoot him at? Well, why'd you shoot him? Okay, well, what'd you shoot him with? She was always the type that was scared about, how she would react on the phone. She was calm as a cucumber, and that call taker had like a really deep Southern accent. She's just a sweetheart. She's like,
oh goodness.
Well, why'd you shoot him, Miss Jane Doe? Because he pushed me, so I shot him.
Okay.
Wow.
And it's South Carolina something. He said
that sounds like it.
He was mad that I went out, or I was going out, and he said I wouldn't, and he pushed me, so I shot him. It's like, oh my gosh.
Legit.
That's great.
That's South Carolina is a bunch of backwoods. I mean, we have places like Myrtle Beach,
Virginia
Charleston,
can be too,
Columbia, but we have some
Oh,
really,
yeah.
really country people. Country is not even the right word.
that's the idea that I'm getting from listening to these podcasts. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, okay. Yeah.
It's the land of meth labs out here.
Oh, boy.
man.
And some moonshining. Woo.
Oh yeah, well, moonshining's up in the upstate.
Okay. Well, Cooper,
my
we
goodness.
appreciate you being on tonight. But before we let you go, we had told you about some rapid fire questions, so we're gonna run through these real quick with you.
Okay.
Would you rather text or talk?
Talk.
Okay. Are you an early bird or night owl?
Night owl, 100%.
Now, if you had superpowers, would you want invisibility or super strength?
Super strength.
Wow, I think that's the first one we've got.
Well, see, he's a firefighter. He switched.
Well, that's true. Yes.
Well, see, invisibility, you could play pranks on people, but super strength, you can do a whole lot of stuff, like pick up cars and shit.
Yeah, that's
See,
true.
that's the fireman mentality right there.
One thing you can't live without.
My cell phone, 100%. Cannot live without my cell phone.
One book or piece of literature or movie, whatever. I don't even have the rest of the damn question written down. So, yeah.
That you think everybody should read or listen to. Doesn't have to be public safety related.
Oh, man. I'm not one much that reads books. I'm very ADHD. I don't have an attention span long enough. As far
What
as
about movies?
I gotta go with the classic Shrek. I love Shrek.
That's awesome.
Me and my other half, we have a picture of Shrek posted in our living room.
Nice. Cool.
And the last one is, what is the message you would want to spread to the world?
Just be respectful, be kind to each other. You know, respect gets respect. It's like that everywhere, from the lowest of income to the elitist of elite. You know, you respect people, you get respect back, and that applies in everyday life and public safety. That keeps me that keeps me safe out on the streets as a firefighter, but it also helped me be successful as a dispatcher, both on the phone and with coworkers. Just, you give respect and you're going to get it back.
That is a great answer. So with that being said, this ends another episode of 911 Delta. Again, Cooper, we thank you very, very much for reaching out and being on the show.
Thank y'all for having me.
And until next time.
Y'all take care.
You too.
You too.